dump them on the other side.
So we're kind of digging through the burned area here, the recent Bennett Street fire next to the railroad tracks, and we've kind of created a little pile of metal parts we found. And Tim, you think these are freight car parts, huh?
Yeah, miscellaneous freight car odds and ends. You know, as you know, they burned the cars here in the late 1930s.
They just, what do they do, just pitch them over the side of the track here?
They rolled them over right over here. In fact, in both your mom's book and Gerald Best's book, it shows pictures of them on fire.
Just roll them over and burn them.
They rolled over the old freight cars, burned them, salvaged the iron parts,
and now this most recent Bennett fire has kind of re-exposed the old dump site here.
Yeah, most definitely. And in addition to burning the old freight cars here, this was pretty much a dump site for the railroad depot. Every time they dump trash and old cans.
Seems like it's an old garbage dump site. So this isn't all just homeless trash here. This is Nevada County narrow gauge trash. This is our history.
This is history here. Real tin
You can't blame that on on everybody.
It's a tradition that just kept going.
That's right. An ancient tradition. Some kind of an ignition switch to something here.
That is, yeah, that's an old selector switch.
Selector switch. But these are old stove bolts and carriage bolts.
Yeah, these kind of bolts are real common in freight cars, freight car hardware. Over on the other side, we found some of those truss rods.
And what do you got there?
Like that. This is a regular tie plate.
Yep.
This went into the track, and the rail ran across here, and this is what spiked the rail onto the ties.
Pete, are you finding anything there?
Yeah, you got some more.
Oh yeah, set it here in the pile here, Pete.
Yeah.
All right, cool. More junk from the narrow gauge. Wow, you got the whole complete bolt assembly there, stove bolts.
Yeah, these are bolts that are used to hold freight cars together.
And those are just big old washers, or?
That's one of the big end caps. When you look at a flat car on the outside, or a box car, you see these giant bolts that hold the beams together for the construction. And then they got these little end caps on the very end of them. You'll see them. I'll get you a picture of that. And so these are bolts that hold all the timbers together, which hold the wooden freight cars together.
And the idea of here is just to grab the timber?
Yeah, the idea here is to make a nice firm support against the head of the bolt here.
Okay.
Right up against
so it doesn't pull through?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. The giant washer is what it is.
Okay.
So they obviously dumped a car right there.
And where, right off the edge here you found that?
Yeah.
And that could have been a source of this particular fire right there. That campfire there, maybe.
You got a campfire pit that climbed up there, perhaps.
Yeah. So if you collect these spikes, you can kind of see the history of the railroad right before your very eyes. This thin spike here is some of the earliest material they were working with. Tim says that the early rail was only 35 pounds per yard, right? And then it worked up consistently heavier and heavier rail all the way up to 60 and beyond, requiring bigger and bigger spikes. So if you find the bigger spikes, that's the later model spikes working with the heavier rail. And if you find the rusty old skinny spikes, that's the original late 1800s spike. Okay, rail fans, this is how this stuff from the narrow gauge kind of goes together. This is a splice plate. It's got these sharp edges here, and this spikes into a railroad tie. This is not a railroad tie, it's just a stick of wood. So that goes down onto the railroad tie. The rail runs this way, and then you spike the rail with your narrow gauge spikes, which are pretty darn small compared to railroad spikes.
Not pretty heavy.
So your spikes go in this way and grab a hold of the rail. And then that all spikes into the cross tie. Now, another thing you're looking for out here are these splice plates. This is where you got two pieces of rail that need to be connected. You use this splice plate and this bolt. This one's busted. But this kind of carriage style bolt right here fits right in there, locks into the splice plate, and then allows you to bolt the two pieces of rail together. And of course that would run the length with the rail. Splice plates, tie plates, and spikes, all that's out here in the burned area. The old railroad ties were turned into fence posts all around Nevada County, and you still see them all over Nevada County today. So if you see some fence posts with these kind of telltale hole patterns in them, and they're square, there's a good chance they were narrow gauge railroad ties. And the best place to see rail from the narrow gauge is right here on Idaho-Maryland Road. If you look at the chain link fence along Wolf Creek, the poles that are holding that up is all Nevada County Railroad rail. So check that out. Here's some of the old, well, there's the ballast there, and then some of the rock making up the railroad bed up to the top of the tracks here, all exposed by the fire.
You can really start to see the separation.
So the road bed is over there,
right here,
and this rock wall takes off and represents a siding for a dairy farm or something, huh?
That used to drop down and come over here, and they used to drop off cars there.
A side track. So the track would be here on the, this would have been filled with ballast and tracked on the uphill side of this rock wall.
Yep.
And it was kind of a retaining wall. And here the rock wall separates even further. The main line's up over there. And then there's this interesting old water canal ditch right down in here. All part of the old Nevada County Narrow Gauge Railroad. Right off of Bennett Street, all exposed now by the recent fire. Or fires. This fire was a very close call for our community. Of course, our gold rush history is ripe with fire history, and we don't need to be repeating that history. This is very close to town.